Hey everybody, it's George. All right, so Jeff, this guy I'm working with, kind of coaching him a little bit. Jeff gave me a call because he's got numbers put together for his first deal. And, you know, he's written multiple contracts. He's tried to get deals before, just hasn't happened. This one he feels pretty good about. So he started walking me through, you know, using the classic 70% rule, started walking me through his after repair value, the ARV, so basically what's it going to retail sale for, his renovation costs, and his planned purchase price. The numbers all, they work. They work. The gross margin's a little thin for a first-time deal, but it's definitely workable if he's just smart about a few things. So we started talking about, you know, things to be prepared for, and I said, what are you using for a contingency on this? And he said, well, 5%. And I told him, I said, no, but 5% is never going to cut it. You know, you're going to go over that. It's a guarantee. And he was a little offended by that because, you know, the whole I know what I'm going to do with it thing. Anyhow, so I told him, I said, listen, for your first time deal, you should be doing at least 15% on a contingency. And he's like, well, wait a minute, that's going to take almost 15 grand out of my margin. I said, okay, so that might be the case. If you don't use the contingency, then you're keeping it in your margin. But if you do, you still have margin left over to walk away without money having to go back into the deal where you're losing cash. So he finally got over that and said, okay. Then he said to me, he goes, well, where can I cut some corners? And I said, well, hang on a second. Pump the brakes for a minute here. What do you mean by cut corners? Because if we're talking about things that can create, that don't address health or safety hazards, or actually can create a health or safety hazard, that is not an option in any way, shape, or form. Then I said, if however, you're talking about cutting corners in terms of, say, the type of material of something, instead of going at a high-end marble, for example, and you're putting in standard quartz, or granite rather, okay, that would be quote-unquote cutting a corner, but you're still putting stone in versus putting in just a basic laminate. So he started throwing out some examples of things. And one example he put in there was that he knew that the mechanicals, it's a boiler-based system, so it's not a new on-demand or anything like that. It's oil-based. So he's got a traditional boiler in there. Boiler's probably 40 years old. So it is an aged boiler. It is certainly going to be into the latter stages if it hasn't been maintained. And it doesn't sound like it has been from what he described. So he asked, what if I don't deal with the boiler? And I said, well, what does that mean? When you say don't deal with the boiler, is it functioning right now? Yes, it is. It's been providing heat. Yes, it has. Okay, so it works. So maybe you don't need to replace it, but you should be prepared that maybe it needs a new burner, for example. So he didn't want to deal with any of that. He said, no, I'm not touching the boiler. I said, well, how much does that take you off the top of your number? He says, well, I got about $2,000 left in for that. And I said, well, that was never enough for the boiler, but okay, let's just go with it for right now. Then he says, well, I want to take the hot water tank off. I said, okay, well, number one, a hot water tank is not a requirement of a house. It's a benefit and a bonus. It's an add-on. It is not a requirement to sell a house. Boiler would be, of course. So he says, well, I'm going to take the hot water tank off. And he says, I'm going to save some money on the materials and the labor there. I said, yep, absolutely. I said, well, you got to lower your price. He said, what do you mean? I said, your retail sale price, your ARV, you have to lower it now. And he was confused. And he said, why? I said, well, the comparables you use in the area, do any of them have a hot water tank in the house? He said, yeah, almost all of them did. I said, well, then now you have to lower your price because you're now a house that is less than what has been selling at that price that you think you can get. So he didn't really like that, of course. We went back and forth over that. He finally agreed, okay, he'll bring down his ARV and he'll adjust it a little bit. And I told him, you may still get that price that you want, which would be an indication of market demand, but you can't assume that you're going to get it because the house is technically less than something else, lacking that hot water tank as the example, which led us into other examples of things he wanted to, you know, cut back on. And I said, everything you're talking about, if it exists in any of those comparables, you have to adjust downward. If you're putting things in the house that don't exist in those comparables and are true improvements, square footage, mechanical improvements, central air, for example, things like that, you've increased the value of the home above and beyond those other comparables because they don't have that. But everything he talked about was taking away from it and actually lowering its value relative to those other comparable sales, which brought me to the final point to him, which was, now where are your numbers? And he said, well, wait a minute. I've brought down my renovation costs. I said, yeah, your renovation cost is coming down because you didn't want to have that contingency that you had to put aside. You're still going to need a contingency. But now he wants to keep the price where it was. I said, the price has to come down because you're not offering as comparable a house as what has been selling. So when he started playing around with that and, just kind of playing off the top of his head with what he thought he could do, he suddenly realized that this deal is looking far less attractive. I said, well, now you're at the junction where you have to decide, do I put money into the house that's going to take more in order to create a better product, or am I putting less money in the house, charging less for it, and basically taking less at the end of the day as well? That is the difference between doing a quickie flip and putting a product on the market that is going to appeal to a customer. People are buying homes. They want things that they don't have to deal with. For example, a new hot water tank, a well-maintained or ready-to-go boiler, central air or ductless split system. As mechanicals, they want windows that they don't have to worry about. When a home inspection is done, home inspector is going to go through and test every window. If you haven't repaired the windows and you have non-functioning windows, those will get flagged at inspection. And a good buyer with a good agent is going to come to you and negotiate for those items. So the more that you put in to address the house, yes, it costs more money, absolutely. But you're giving more value to the home, which should create more intrinsic value, which is going to raise its value in the market. At the same time, you can't go so far over that you exceed market value, but not to beat that horse to death. But if you take things away, you have to lower its market value. So, Jeff's calling me back. We're going to talk again probably this evening. We're going to go through his new game plan because now he's realizing that he is notching so much out of this project, it's becoming just a quickie flip. He's basically just doing floors, counters, and walls. And buyers aren't really driven to that anymore. A lot of buyers will turn around saying that's not good enough for the price that I'm paying in this market due to the cost of money that I have and everything else that's going with it. So anyhow, he's calling me back. We'll see what happens tonight. But if you're looking at how you're going to renovate something, remember, there's a balancing act in how much you invest in the property to what you can get back from it, but you cannot simply deduct things without then lowering the anticipated resale price. If you're in an area that has a high demand to it, you may be able to squeak by. You may get a buyer who says, you know what, screw it, I'll take it anyway because I need something. But I wouldn't bank on that. I would not bank on that at all. You need to put comparable products on the market in order to get a comparable price. It's just that simple. So, if you guys have questions, always, please feel free to reach out. If you have questions, thoughts, concerns, whatever, if you want to chat about something, I'm always happy to do so. See you guys later. Have a great weekend.